Good afternoon, bon après-midi, buenos días, buenas tardes. We will start this big conference, 3-day conference with the first session, and we are very happy and proud that the President of the Commission will be with us and deliver a keynote speak in the first session, and then we will have a panel and discussion, and at the beginning, Luca will have also a keynote speak for introducing the conference. What is the idea of the conference? Why we organize ETUC, ETUI, this conference toward a new socio-ecological contract? I think the main argument is times are changing, and now the Commission and the Member State have decided that for 2030, we have to reduce the CO2 emission by 55%. 55% is huge. It's really huge. Because in the last 30 years, from the 90 to now, we have reduced by 20%. So in 10 years, we will have to reduce 3 or 4 times quicker than we had in the past. It's no longer to ride a bike. It's no longer to change the bulb. It's something which will have a huge impact, positive or less positive, on the labor market, on the sectors, and that need to have an in-depth discussion. And we construct this 3-day conference among 2 key ideas. The first is to have a discussion, conversation between the 3 terms of the equation: economy, social, and environmental. And each plenary will try to address one dimension: economic and social, social and environmental, etc. And to try what is the consensus, where we can go further together in that called table of consensus. But we will have also 8 panels, and the panels will address difficult questions: working time, biodiversity, car industry, etc. On that question, there is no consensus. There are important questions, and they are important that we have a conversation where we want to go, what is important, what are the impediments, what we have to take care about. Because for sure, the situation now is to go beyond discourse. We are all agreed that we need a just transition, but what do we mean by that? Do we mean also that we have the priority on inequality, on taxation, wealth, etc.? Or is just we have the same society with some kind of technological change? I think that's important for the future, and that's the idea of this conference, to have this conversation and to be a turning point for the intellectual debate, for the trade union movement, for the Commission to say, okay, after that, where do we go? What we have to still to discuss and have perhaps difficult conversation, but what we already agree, and how can we go along those lines for the future. So thank you for coming. We had a huge success. We have more than 1,500 people having registering, showing really the key interest for all Europe and outside of Europe. And I stop here to give the floor to Luca, who will give the introductory speech for the ETUC. And once again, I would like to thank very warmly the President of the Commission who took time to be with us in this early afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe, and warmly welcome to all of you. President Ursula von der Leyen, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, and all the distinguished guests and speakers, but of course also all our colleagues from the trade union movement all over Europe participating in this discussion and reflection over 3 days. Unfortunately, we are obliged by the circumstances to connect online, but nevertheless, we really hope that the discussion will be meaningful and will be also very inspirational for all of us to try to, let's say, get some inputs that can really improve our daily work when it comes to transition, making this transition just and fairer for everybody in Europe, and particularly from our point of view, of course, for working people. I would like also, before framing the discussion with some introduction, I would like also really to thank the ETUI team for the extraordinary work they delivered to prepare this conference. It was a huge effort to organize 3 days of discussions online, and the fact that more than 1,000 people have registered for the different sessions, and we have already now almost 300 people connected for this opening session is really a sign of great success for this initiative. As Philippe already said, this conference is a biannual tradition, as you know, that Etuc and Etui organize this conference, but this conference this year falls in a very crucial moment for Europe, for the rest of the world, for everybody, for working people, because we are still, unfortunately, in the middle of the COVID outbreak, and we are still struggling to try to sort it out, to try to provide the solutions that are needed for people to preserve, first of all, of course, the health and safety of all citizens all over Europe, but at the same time also to try to recover our economy, to make sure that people will not lose their jobs, to make sure that businesses, companies will not disappear from our markets, and at the same time that everybody will be able to cope also with challenges that existed before COVID exploded. Because we cannot hide the fact that the financial and economic crisis a decade ago hit Europe very hard. The policies that follow, particularly austerity, cuts, dismantling of social protection systems, collective bargaining, industrial relations, all these solutions didn't fix the problem. On the contrary, they probably have aggravated the problem in this respect. And in parallel, new challenges came out on top of globalization and financiarization of the economy in terms of climate change, digitalization, automation of the production, and the explosion of the digital economy, and many elements of innovation, but at the same time also incredible challenges, particularly for the economy and for the labor market, for working people in the workplaces, particularly when these workplaces became virtual. We were very happy, and we really welcome the fact that the newly established European Commission in 2019, and Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, kicked off immediately by addressing these challenges from the right angle, I will say. The right angle because the program that Ursula von der Leyen presented at the beginning of her mandate more than 1 year ago, was really going to the core of the problem, how to make the climate transition an opportunity for greening our economy and making our economic model more sustainable, how to make sure that innovation and digitalization will not affect people negatively, and on the contrary, will offer an opportunity for better and sustainable development for our economy and society, and at the same time, how to make sure that all this will be just in terms of transition, especially when it comes to accompanying businesses and workers towards a better working conditions and better protection for all. This paradigm is very difficult to be struck, and indeed the program presented at that time was really ambitious in this respect, but then unfortunately COVID hit. And this made the job of all of us, of the Commission, of the European institutions, of governments, but also of social partners, trade unions, really, really harder. Making sure that we can react to COVID, protect people during COVID, and at the same time continue addressing the challenges that existed already before, and making sure that we can really build up a fair society, a fair labor market, protection and rights for all. Well, this is really a dilemma that is very difficult to solve. Nevertheless, we have to recognize that all of us, with great efforts, have been able to try to cope. And some important results have been achieved, also because to some extent, the COVID outbreak has been also some kind of game changer, I will say. It, of course, hit very hard everybody and is a very huge, dramatic tragedy for humanity and for Europe from our perspective, but at the same time obliged also all the actors involved, from institutions to social partners to other stakeholders, to change completely their point of view, to change completely their approach. A lot of blockages and paralysis, I would say even, that existed in the public discourse, in the public narrative before COVID, well, it was transformed immediately by COVID. The first sign of this was the fact that after years and years of discussions on how to get out from a crisis, the previous crisis, how to overcome austerity policies, well, the European institutions decided to go for something completely different. No more austerity, on the contrary, solidarity, and massive and ambitious emergency measures to save citizens, companies and workers during the lockdowns. The emergency measures that the European Commission, then approved by the Council, pushed forward a few months ago, and for us particularly significant is of course this mechanism called SURE. Well, these emergency measures were really bold and ambitious in this respect, and have also made sure that finally solidarity and the capacity of moving from blind intergovernmental solutions towards really communitarian approach, well, that this suddenly was possible because of COVID. Of course, not all is resolved. We have to be aware of this because we know that the emergency is not finished. And I want to tell you, President, that we as the trade union movement are very worried that the member states could have the temptation, I will say, not to create additional debt, not to spend so much public money, whatever, could have the temptation to withdraw these emergency measures at the national level too early. We all know that the recovery and resilience plans at the national level will not kick off before the second half of this year, and the impact of the massive investment that the European Commission has deployed will take time to show its effects. So it's absolutely fundamental. This is really an appeal to you. I know you are absolutely sensible in this respect. The appeal is, please tell member states it's absolutely necessary that the emergency measures will continue. We have at the moment more than 40 million workers that are suspended from work, thanks to these different short-time work arrangements, income compensation schemes at the national level, plus more than 20 million workers that already became unemployed. If the emergency measures are withdrawn too early, the larger part of these 40 million will turn into unemployment. This will mean for the European Union facing an enormous unemployment tragedy from which it will be almost impossible to recover, despite of the massive resources that the Next Generation EU plan is going to disburse. So this is really a crucial point. If we don't manage the emergency, if we don't continue to help people, well, facing the challenges of the future will be almost impossible. The second element that is very important for us to underline in this discussion is that, of course, again, we welcome hugely the great effort that the European Union has put in place through the New Generation EU and Recovery and Resilience funds. This is really, again, a great change in the political and public discourse of the last few years, because for the first time after years it was possible to agree on common bonds, on common debt instruments, and even on the suspension of the fiscal rules until this terrible crisis is not overcome. Again, also in this case, it's very important that this path towards recovery is effective and just, and that everybody is really included, nobody is really left behind. In this respect, it's very important, of course, that the member states will make their part and that we can, at the same time, also make sure that all the actors of the economy and the society can really participate in the process for implementation. Social partners, other stakeholders must be involved in this process in a timely and proper proper manner. This is happening at the European level. We don't have anything to complain about. The European Commission is being absolutely keen to involve properly the social partners and the trade unions in particular. You, President, all the commissioners have done a lot of huge work to make sure that all this is really shared by everybody. But this is not always the case in each and every country. There are still too many gaps in terms of proper involvement of social partners at the national level, and in some cases even workers' rights, trade union rights, the right to strike, some democratic rights are even at risk with some few governments, very few fortunately, but there are some that are trying to misuse the COVID outbreak as an alibi to try to smash down democracy and democratic rights in some European countries. We are very vigilant about this, and we also really appreciate the fact that the European Commission has launched this plan for democracy. It's very important, and in this plan also social rights, workers' rights are considered together with basic fundamental human rights and democratic rights. But coming back to the recovery strategy, is a game changer in terms of macroeconomics because it has had a fantastic positive impact on the European economic governance rules. But it's also very important for all of us that then after the recovery will start, we don't come back to business as usual. There is no new normal. We have to build a new paradigm in terms of our economic model, making sure that our economic model will become more sustainable, more inclusive, fairer in the future. In this sense, it's very important to continue the very important work that the European Commission has started in terms of rethinking our economic governance and fiscal rules, but also in terms of boosting the possibility of having own resources at the European level. And we really appreciate and support the very ambitious proposals in terms of European taxation that the European Commission is going to push forward very soon. But of course, the most important elements of this recovery strategy are, as Philippe already said, green, digital, and social. When it comes to green and digital, for us, just transition is really the key word. We are really convinced, we are not conservative as a trade union movement, we are really convinced that greening the economy, introducing innovation and digitalization into the economy is a great opportunity also for workers. But for this to be an opportunity, we need to make sure that everybody feels involved, everybody is not left behind. And to do that is of course important to upload and improve the skills of working people, but you know, as we always say, is not enough to upskill people, because if you are going to lose your job and there is no job alternative for you in your territory, in your region, in your community, you will be a fantastically upskilled, unemployed person. And this is not the perspective that we need to offer to our workers for the future. We need to make sure that workers can really enter into a good governance at European, national and regional level that can really create new quality jobs in a sufficient number to compensate the losses that will come from the digital and the green transition. This needs a plan, an industrial plan, an economic plan. This needs also governance. This needs also social dialogue, collective bargaining, involvement of social partners at all levels. We are really confident that the European Commission will really recommend all this to be done to the member states. And last but not least, the social dimension. We are really happy that in few days, in a couple of weeks, a few weeks, we will have the action plan for the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights published. We are actively participating in the discussion with the European Commission to shape this action plan in a way that is really effective and can really implement the rights and protection for people on the ground in practice. It's also very important to make sure that this action plan, the pillar itself, becomes a fundamental instrument in the hands of the European and national institutions. It has to be framed in the European economic governance. It has to be framed in the European semester. It has to be part of the overall strategies of the European Union, and why not? We also think that the European Pillar of Social Rights will have to be sooner or later part of the European treaties. There are many initiatives that we would like to see in the action plan, initiatives from green and digital just transition, initiatives for improving the working conditions and rights of working people, initiatives to make our social protection systems more sustainable, more universal, covering everybody, and also more adequate in each and every country. And then, of course, we need also to make sure that the social dimension is part of the broader picture of the European action, including international trade, international cooperation, and every other policy that the European Union is going to put in place. These are our wishes, but this is also our, let's say, platform for campaigning, for action, for lobbying, and we know that you are very sensitive when it comes to all these elements, and I'm really sure that you will bring a word of hope and a word of, let's say, possibility of creating a great alliance in Europe between the institutions, the social partners, all the actors and stakeholders, to make sure that the citizens, working people, can really feel to be protected, can really feel to be on board in this ambitious project for a more sustainable recovery. So big challenges, but we are ready to make it. We are really ready to participate in this extraordinary process for change, and be sure that the European trade union movement will be on your side to achieve these results. Thank you very much, and thank you very much again for being with us today.
Thank you, thank you, Luca, for this welcome speech. I think it was already full of content, and as you said at the end of your speech, there is big challenge, but the trade union movement is there to participate and try to define the direction of the change. Now I give the floor to the President of the Commission for the opening speech, and once again, thank you for being with us, and without delay, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, cher Philippe Pochet. Thank you, caro Luca Visentini. And of course, a warm welcome to all the trade union representatives, distinguished guests. My thank you for this invitation, but also for the very close cooperation. Luca, you have mentioned it, between the European Trade Union Confederation and the European Commission. I strongly believe in the importance indeed of dialogue with social partners. It is an essential part of our democracy. So good policies which will stand the test of time can only be built through dialogue. And all parts of our society must have a say. And you, the trade unions, represent an essential part of our societies. It is through your engagement that the working people get a seat at the table of decision makers. This is why we're here this afternoon. And this has been crucial through the years to build the European social market economy. I experienced firsthand the importance of social dialogue during my time, of course, as a minister in Germany. And in those days, I worked a lot with unions and employers, for example, to improve the reconciliation of work and family, or to promote the participation of women in top positions, or to introduce minimum wages in some economic sectors, such as the care sector, for example. And I remember, of course, it took long and sometimes difficult negotiations, but it made such a difference in the life of so many hardworking people. And back then, I started supporting the idea of a national minimum wage in Germany. And indeed, I'm proud that last year the European Commission proposed a directive for adequate minimum wages across Europe, of course in full respect of national traditions, and important, the freedom of social partners. I proposed it because I'm convinced of two things. The first one is work should always pay, and everyone who works full-time should at least earn enough to make a living. And my second principle is collective bargaining is crucial because you need to tailor the minimum wage to the local and the sectoral conditions. So social dialogue is a pillar of our social market economy in good times and even more so in difficult times like these. It is for this reason that this year, more than any other, this year should be a year of social dialogue. The pandemic is putting our social fabric to test. You mentioned it. Millions of Europeans are worried about the future of their families and their businesses. They worry about the virus, of course, but not only. They see that their jobs and their workplaces are changing rapidly. I know people in their 20s or 30s who have already changed more jobs than their parents in their entire life. And workers of all ages have to learn new technologies or new ways of doing old things. And yes, this can be exciting, but it can also be scary for many. And what Europeans expect is quite simple. They want to know that their hard work will be rewarded. They want to know that if they study and innovate and come up with good ideas, they will get a fair chance to succeed. And they want to know that if they fail, they will get another chance. And this is what Europe's social market economy has always been about: fair opportunities and social protection in times of need. And this is what Europeans are asking for. But today, our economy is changing so fast that this cannot be taken for granted any longer. And the question we all face is indeed, how can we deliver on the expectations of Europeans in a world changing so fast? If you look at our current rules, they are based on old realities, and they do not entirely reflect anymore the speed and the scale of transformations we are embarking on. And for this, I think we need a new social rule book. We need a social rule book that focuses on the quality jobs of the future and opens up new opportunities. A social rule book that allows hardworking people to improve their standards of living. A rule book that gives adequate protection to those in need, and one that ensures solidarity between generations. A rule book that puts skills and innovation and social protection on an equal footing. So it's basically about reconciling the social and the market in a changing economy. But there's also more. We must also reconcile, and this is the title of your meeting today and over the next weeks, we must reconcile our economy with the social and the planet. Europeans have felt the impact of climate change for years. We have all experienced torrid summer sand, torrential rains, which we have never seen before. But during the pandemic, something else has changed in our relationship with nature. Europeans are rediscovering the importance of some common goods in their daily life. Our public health, for instance, as well as the importance of nature, plain and simply, nature. We have seen what our cities could look like with less cars. We have started to measure the distance that separates us from the nearest park or the nearest forest. And at the same time, we must lay the foundations of a healthier economy. An economy that grows without poisoning the air we breathe. An economy that is more focused on the well-being of people. And this is not utopia. This is possible, and it is already happening. We know that the investments in clean energy, for instance, create twice as many jobs as investment in the old fossil fuels. So they are good for the environment, and they are good for the economy, and they are good for people too. And trade unions are leading the work to make this green transition a just transition. I think, for instance, of your Spanish affiliates engagement for mine workers. You struck deals with coal mining businesses so that when a coal mine closes, workers are being trained on a new job. That's the way it has to be. So trade unions are accompanying workers in the transition. And I want Europe to do just the same. The transition towards a greener economy needs to be steered very carefully. And of course, green innovation must be rewarded and incentivized. At the same time, though, we must also make sure that all workers can benefit from the green transition. That's what you're saying. Not just those who work in innovative green companies, that's good, but no, more, all workers in all sectors and all European regions. And it's about our people and our planet. It's about opportunities and social protection. It's about an economy that cares not only for GDP, but also for the well-being of Europeans. You mentioned it. Since the start of our mandate, we have already taken the first steps. First, we brought the Sustainable Development Goals at the center of the European semester. Second, we expanded social protection during the pandemic. And third, indeed, we are working for green, digital, and fair recovery with Next Generation EU. So let me elaborate a little bit on this, and let me begin with the European semester and the Sustainable Development Goals. For over a decade, European countries have coordinated their economic policies through the European semester. The semester was created as a tool to coordinate public spending and reforms throughout our union. Last year, for the first time, we put sustainability at the center of the European semester. And since then, the semester is structured around 4 dimensions: environmental sustainability, productivity, fairness, and macroeconomic stability. We discuss with member states whether the economic policies advance, whether they advance the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations. So we focus on whether public investment will cut CO2 emissions. Will it reduce inequalities? Will it promote quality education and healthcare? So it's a first but decisive step towards indeed a more sustainable European Union. We started this work already in the early days of our mandate. And as you've said, then came the pandemic and the first lockdowns. All of Europe was hit, but we also must see that some countries and some sectors struggle more than others. So some specific industry immediately felt the blow, for example, the tourism or the culture sector or constructions. And indeed, this was a crucial time, because then companies with no orders anymore all of a sudden were tempted to lay off their employees. And indeed, there was little they could do on their own, and they needed a lifeline out of the crisis. And we should keep in mind that while some member states had the strength to intervene, good so, others simply did not have the financial reserves to do so. And it is my deep conviction that Europe must step up in these circumstances, because all Europeans should enjoy the same opportunities and the same protections in the face of a crisis like this. And indeed, this is why I proposed in March 2020 the European initiative to support national schemes of short-time work. Luca, as you said it, we call it SURE. It is the first initiative of this kind, and I'm very grateful for the support we received from your confederation in those eventful days. It would not have been possible without you. The European Commission is now raising money on financial markets through social bonds, and this money is being used by member states to support their national programs for short-time work. SURE is now providing 90 billion euros in 18 countries to help employees, to help employers, but also, and this is crucial, to help the self-employed. And figures from your confederation show that at the height of the crisis last May, 42 million European workers benefited from income support measures. So Europe took responsibility and delivered social protection to millions of Europeans. SURE was our immediate reaction to the emergency. Our recovery plan, the Next Generation EU, is even more ambitious. With the 750 million euros in investment, we can indeed begin to build the economy of tomorrow. And I'm confident that with such firepower, Europe will recover from this crisis. But for me, one question is even more important. What kind of recovery do we want for Europe? And my answer is that we must aim for a green, a digital, and a fair recovery. The need for a greener economy predates the pandemic. But with Next Generation EU, we can speed up the transition and make it more inclusive. And let me take just one example. You know all that the construction sector was badly hit by the crisis. Now, Next Generation EU can reopen building sites all across Europe thanks to its renovation wave. The main goal is here to make our buildings more energy efficient. We have to keep in mind that buildings account for 40% of our emissions. And very often they waste more of the energy than they consume. So by refurbishing and retrofitting them, we can improve the energy performance of the buildings while preserving our cultural heritage. And Next Generation EU is just doing that. And at the same time, it will contribute to restarting an important economic sector. Next Generation EU will encourage house owners to renovate their properties, but also incentivize the use of innovative materials and new technologies for new buildings. And as a consequence, construction workers will need to learn more about green technologies and materials. So Next Generation EU will also invest in giving workers the skills they need to navigate the green and the digital transition. And this is why, as we worked on Next Generation EU, we also presented a new Pact for Skills. The pact is an offer for cooperation with you, the trade unions, but also with employers, chambers of commerce, and employment agencies. Let us join forces so that as many workers as possible have the skills they need to succeed in an evolving labor market. And if we get this right, the green and the digital transition will benefit not only young professionals in innovative businesses, that's fine, but workers of all ages across all sectors in all European regions. So you see the logic behind Next Generation EU. With the right investment, we can restart the economy. We can make it greener and more digital and make sure we leave no one behind. Next Generation EU is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform our economy. And this transformation should be shaped by the people of Europe. And again, I come back to what I said initially. This is why 2021 must be a year of social dialogue. And yes, it was mentioned right now, national governments are working on their national recovery and resilience plans to bring our common European priorities into their local realities. And here, trade unions and social partners should be closely involved in this process. This is the moment to bring the social dimension into recovery. Pushing GDP back to pre-crisis level is important, yes, but it's only part of our job. Employment has to pick up just as quickly. And the green and digital recovery must be a jobs recovery too, a people's recovery. And indeed, an important moment of dialogue will come in May, when we will all gather in Porto for the social summit organized by the Portuguese presidency. It will be the occasion for trade unions and employers, but also citizens and institutions, to send a united message on what kind of economy we want to build. The compass of our work will be the European Pillar of Social Rights, as a set of 20 rights and principles, including the equality of treatment and opportunities for all people, the right to a fair wage, the right to lifelong learning, the right to quality care. And in March, we will present an action plan to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights. So with this action plan, we will look at how to turn these principles into reality across Europe, how to implement them. And there is a number of practical measures that I would like to discuss with you. We should talk about the right to lifelong learning for all Europeans. One way to do so could be through individual learning accounts. So perhaps every worker would accumulate every year a certain number of credits to invest in getting new skills. The individual learning accounts already exist in some countries, but they have never really turned into Europe-wide practice. So let us work together so that all workers can get the training they need at every stage of their career. Let us bring together your expertise with the employers' unions too, just to find a balanced solution to this topic. And indeed, we should also talk about child poverty, because all children are born equal, whatever their parents' background. We should talk about equal pay and equal opportunities for women. We should talk about youth employment, because years of progress risk being compromised. And yes, we should talk about platform workers. I know that your confederation has adopted a comprehensive resolution on this issue. And like you, I believe that platform workers must be entitled to fair working conditions and social protection like any other worker. Let me put it in other words. New forms of work must not become synonymous of a precarious existence or health and safety challenges or inadequate access to social protection. New forms of work must come with equal rights. And the path towards equal rights is still long, we know that. So this year, we have all realized that some workers are invisible to our society. The delivery men, the cleaning ladies, the nurses in the hospitals and care homes, the clerks who have kept our local grocery shops open through the pandemic. All of a sudden, we have started calling them essential workers. And this is good because they are essential. Their work matters, their right matter. And today we are all more aware about this. And this is also thanks to you, trade unionists all across Europe. So this terrible year has reminded me of an old truth about our union. It says Europe is forged in crisis. It is in the darkest moments that we find the courage to put our differences aside and join forces. Today, Europe is financing social protection for millions of our citizens. We have put together a recovery package of a size unseen since the Marshall Plan. And we have approved ambitious climate goals. Goals that seemed out of reach until just 1 year ago. And this is what Europe does. We find strength in adversity. When everything seems to push us back, we pull through and come out stronger than before. And this is what gives me confidence that the recovery is within reach. And that from the pandemic, if we do it right, a stronger social Europe can emerge. And this is why the road to Porto must be paved through social dialogue. And you have my commitment to working with you towards the social summit and towards a fair and just recovery. I thank you very much for your attention. In this sense, long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame la Présidente. I think that you present a very broad landscape of all the change of the Commission, and I will just want to put some of the words that I think were key in your presentation. I think certainly minimum wage and your commitment to support the minimum wage is important, but also the social rules book that you mentioned, which is new and important, the common goods and the nature, but also all the discussion that you are pushing, and I think the European Council is going in the same direction about well-being. It's another way to speak about post-GDP, that we will have the discussion, which is often difficult. You know, we don't have to say it's an easy discussion, but we need to have this discussion about the value, how we measure progress in the future, and what kind of recovery. And I think that's the word of the transformation of the economy and the kind of window of opportunity that we have once a generation is really important. So I will not repeat all the very important elements of your presentation and discourse. I think to finish what you say, I think two words I think were key is dialogue. We will move to another society if we can have a dialogue between different interests, different vision, and we can move forward. And in the dialogue, the social dialogue, which is at the heart of the trade unions and also the employer. And I think with that's also the goal of this conference, to have this conversation and move the discussion forward with the keyword that you gave us for thinking the rest of the conference. So I would like to thank you to have been with us for almost 1 hour. I know that you have other obligation and you can not stay. Even you would like to stay with us, you said clearly. So thank you again for your presentation, and have a good afternoon.
May I also thank you, dear President. Dear Ursula, it was really inspirational, I would say, what you told us, and thank you also for recognizing the important role that the European Trade Union Confederation and more in general the European Trade Union movement, also our affiliates in each and every country, in each and every sector have played to try to overcome this crisis and to protect working people during these very difficult times. Be sure that we will be on your side to make sure that these important goals that you have emphasized will be met. And we think really that with the contribution of all of us, we can really make it. We can really come out from this situation, and particularly we can really build up a more sustainable and inclusive recovery for Europe. Philippe already emphasized some very important elements that you have mentioned in your speech. And by the way, there are also some nuances, I would say, because this idea of having a new rule book for our social model is really something we would really like to go through with you to try to understand better what you have in mind. And we are sure that all the different pieces of the picture that you have put on the table today, we really concur to create this new rule book that can really help us in rebuilding and reinforcing our social market economy and our social model. So thank you very much again, and be sure that the trade unions in Europe will be always ready for dialogue and for constructive cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Merci, Luca. Et je vais passer maintenant pour un petit moment au français. Nous avons un panel avec 4 participants. Je vais les présenter un à un. Et nous allons organiser le débat de la façon suivante. Ils vont avoir maximum 10 minutes pour leur présentation, et puis je leur poserai une question dans laquelle ils ne sont pas obligés de répondre directement. Nous aurons à la fin éventuellement des présentations, l'une ou l'autre question de Lucas. Posez vos questions dans le chat. Nous avons un écran en face de nous qui nous permet de voir les questions. Nous en prendrons évidemment les principales pour avoir une demi-heure de débat. Et après une intervention sur le Team Waiver, vous verrez comment lier les différentes session de notre conférence. Donc maintenant, j'introduis Laurent Berger. Laurent Berger est le président de la Confédération européenne des syndicats et je le remercie d'être avec nous cet après-midi. Il va s'exprimer en français. Laurent, tu as 10 minutes. La parole est à toi et merci encore de nous avoir rejoints.
Merci Philippe, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Évidemment, on se rejoint par le biais du numérique. On aurait tellement préféré être tous ensemble dans la même salle, mais en tout cas, bravo encore une fois aux équipes de la CES et d'Etuc de tenir cette conférence. Cela a été dit, nous traversons la conjugaison de crises d'une profondeur inégalée. La crise sanitaire, évidemment, qui nous occupe beaucoup dans la période, mais la crise économique, la crise sociale, la crise écologique et finalement aussi une forme parfois de crise démocratique. Et cette crise sanitaire, elle a servi de révélateur car elle a remis en lumière 4 points importants. La première chose, c'est l'interdépendance des individus, des personnes, tout comme d'ailleurs l'interdépendance des États. Deuxième élément, cette crise elle a mis en lumière les fragilités de nos économies qui ont besoin de soutien et qui ne peuvent pas se passer de la puissance publique. Troisième élément, cette crise a mis en lumière, elle met en lumière des inégalités criantes qui sont accentuées par la période que nous traversons et qui sont devenues encore plus intolérables. Des inégalités d'accès aux services publics, des inégalités entre travailleurs selon le statut ou la taille de l'entreprise dans laquelle il ou elle travaille, des inégalités salariales, des inégalités géographiques, des inégalités dans la répartition de la richesse créée. Et enfin, le dernier élément que cette crise a mis en lumière, c'est un risque démocratique inédit depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale, accentué par ces inégalités et ce sentiment d'incertitude et de crainte dans l'avenir qui est le cas de nombreux citoyens. Et tout cela se passe à un moment où l'urgence climatique ne peut plus attendre. On n'a plus que 9 ans avant l'échéance intermédiaire de 2030, mais nous sommes dans des trajectoires bien au-dessus des 1,5 degrés de l'accord de Paris. Et c'est évidemment pas sans lien avec la crise sanitaire que nous traversons. D'ailleurs, dans mon pays, en France, aujourd'hui, l'État vient d'être condamné pour son action insuffisante après une mobilisation citoyenne qui s'appelait l'affaire du siècle, une mobilisation insuffisante dans le cadre de cette transformation écologique. Mais cette crise, elle a aussi mis en lumière du positif. D'abord, ça a été dit par Lucas et Madame la Présidente, ça a mis en lumière la capacité de l'Union européenne et de ses institutions à faire face. Et ça a mis également en lumière la pertinence d'un modèle social qui se veut universel. Cette crise du Covid, elle bouleverse nos repères collectifs, elle nous oblige à penser autrement, à prendre conscience de certaines limites de notre modèle économique et social. Et donc, c'est à la fois une période difficile, très difficile pour nombre de travailleurs, et Lucas a rappelé combien ils étaient nombreux à perdre leur emploi et à subir de la précarité, mais ça peut aussi être une période d'émulation collective où certaines barrières ou conventions peuvent tomber. C'est une période où peuvent s'ouvrir de nouvelles perspectives. C'est le cas, par exemple, il faut le dire, de l'action de la Banque centrale européenne, dont les nouvelles capacités d'action pourraient permettre à terme d'être aussi au service de la transition écologique ou du plan de relance européen. Cette crise, elle montre combien l'intervention massive des États dans la sphère économique constitue également une opportunité pour orienter la stratégie des acteurs économiques. Orienter une stratégie vers davantage de transition écologique, vers une accélération de cette transition écologique par une logique de contrepartie aux aides apportées aux entreprises. Enfin, la crise nous apprend sur nous-mêmes et sur notre capacité à les surmonter. D'abord, notre besoin de solidarité au regard de nos interdépendances dont j'ai parlé précédemment. La solidarité entre individus, mais aussi la solidarité entre les États. Elle met aussi en lumière notre capacité à hiérarchiser entre nos valeurs, à prendre des mesures inédites, parfois contraires à des exigences économiques de court terme qui étaient pourtant quasi sacralisées avant cette épidémie. Et puis, la nécessité aussi d'une plus grande résilience de nos économies, à laquelle la transition écologique peut concourir pleinement. Et donc, la crise en cours, elle n'est pas sans résonance avec la crise climatique que nous traversons. Parce que la crise climatique, elle requiert également, comme la crise sanitaire, de l'anticipation, des mesures préventives plutôt que d'être seulement dans le curatif, et puis également l'implication de chacun. Et donc, je crois qu'on a l'opportunité, alors qu'on traverse une épreuve collective, une épreuve mondiale, mais aussi une épreuve européenne, on a finalement l'opportunité de se fixer un nouvel horizon pour l'Europe. Un nouvel horizon qui serait une logique de plus long terme, une logique d'anticipation, d'innovation, de coopération, de solidarité au service de cette résilience. Et donc, je crois que si on doit tenir compte de quelques enseignements, le principal, c'est qu'on ne peut plus traiter ces différentes crises en silo. Elles sont totalement imbriquées. C'est tout le sens d'ailleurs de ce séminaire. C'est une approche systémique dont nous avons besoin, à tous les niveaux, pour prendre à bras-le-corps la complexité des défis qui sont posés devant nous, que ce soit sur la question économique, sociale et évidemment écologique. Et donc, il nous appartient, dans cette logique systémique, de trouver des solutions qui peuvent donner à l'Europe une longueur d'avance. Et pour fixer ce nouveau paradigme, il y a plusieurs prérequis qui sont indispensables et j'en évoquerai simplement 3. Le premier, ça a été dit tout à l'heure et ça a été repris par Philippe, la méthode est du dialogue social avant toute chose. Une des clés de sortie de ces crises, c'est le dialogue entre les différentes parties prenantes, entre les intérêts contradictoires et être dans une capacité à co-construire des réponses appropriées. Et dans ce cadre, les représentants des travailleurs doivent être entendus au même titre que les acteurs économiques, au même niveau, avec la même exigence. Et si on avait, pour s'en persuader, besoin d'arguments, il faudrait juste se rappeler le rôle clé que la CES a tenu durant cette période. Le rôle clé que la CES joue dans la prise en compte d'une complexité européenne au service du progrès écologique et social. Et je crois qu'on a un outil syndical aujourd'hui qui permet de prendre en compte ce qu'est la complexité européenne et la complexité des sujets. Plus largement, on a aussi besoin d'entendre la société civile organisée. Et c'est une des conditions, je crois, de la relance, et notamment de la transition écologique, et c'est aussi un impératif démocratique. C'est ce qui nous a guidés en France avec la CFDT à mettre en œuvre ce pacte du pouvoir de vivre, qui est une alliance inédite de 62 organisations de la société civile, qui vise à porter un projet de société conciliant la nécessaire performance économique avec la justice sociale, l'urgence écologique et l'impératif démocratique. Le deuxième prérequis indispensable, c'est la capacité de se fixer des indicateurs pour ce nouveau paradigme. Nous avons longtemps piloté l'Europe sur la base de 3 critères, le déficit, la dette, l'inflation, tous assis sur le PIB. Mais le PIB aujourd'hui ne suffit pas à dire la complexité du monde. Et donc, pour renouer avec le progrès et l'adhésion au projet européen, nous devons être capables de mesurer ce qui nous fait progresser. Et pour ça, nous devons nous doter d'indicateurs de développement durable qui nous servent de boussole. L'éducation, la formation dont il a été question dans les propos de Madame la Présidente, le bien-être, la pauvreté, la biodiversité, l'émission de gaz à effet de serre, l'état de santé des populations. Tous ces éléments, tous ces indicateurs et bien d'autres disent autant, voire plus, de nos richesses que le seul PIB. Nous devons aussi nous doter d'une taxonomie sociale ambitieuse, aux côtés de la taxonomie verte qui est évidemment indispensable. C'est en cours et c'est une bonne chose, mais nous devons ne pas renoncer à pouvoir aller sur cette taxonomie. Et puis, nous devons aussi proposer des normes comptables qui permettent de prendre en compte les enjeux sociaux et environnementaux dans la conduite de nos entreprises, de nos administrations et également de nos États. Et donc, ces indicateurs, qui me semblent être un prérequis indispensable, doivent traduire la réelle utilité sociale et écologique des investissements dans l'avenir. C'est aussi ainsi que nous serons performants économiquement. Et enfin, le troisième et dernier prérequis qui me semble indispensable, c'est d'avoir une Europe des valeurs. une Europe des valeurs à hauteur de femmes et des hommes. Nous traversons une période de turbulence inédite depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale, avec des risques majeurs sur la démocratie, comme je l'ai dit. Et cela suppose de garder le cap et le sens. Le cap, ce sont les valeurs de l'Union européenne. On ne les rappelle sans doute jamais assez, même si les débats autour du plan de relance ont permis de les remettre sur le devant de la scène parce qu'elles étaient finalement en partie attaquées. Le respect de la dignité humaine, de la liberté, de la démocratie, l'égalité, l'état de droit, le respect des droits de l'homme, y compris les droits des minorités, le pluralisme, la non-discrimination, la justice, la solidarité, l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes. Ces valeurs sont constitutives du modèle européen et nous devons les faire vivre au quotidien. Remettre l'Europe à hauteur de femmes et d'hommes, c'est aussi remettre le projet européen en faisant des politiques européennes avec et pour les citoyens d'Europe. C'est un enjeu de performance économique, de justice sociale, mais aussi d'avenir démocratique et évidemment une clé de la transition écologique. On ne fera pas cette transition juste sans les citoyens et sans particulièrement les travailleurs et travailleuses. Et donc, on a besoin pour cela d'une Europe qui fixe un cap, mais aussi d'une Europe qui régule les GAFA, qui a une logique, qui réfléchit enfin à sa fiscalité pour lutter contre le dumping, qui protège, une Europe qui protège avec le salaire minimum, avec le socle européen des droits sociaux, mais aussi une Europe qui innove à travers des politiques de santé, à travers cet enjeu de transformation écologique. Et donc, au final, on a durant cette crise, durant cette période, cette épreuve que nous traversons, une Union européenne qui a montré sa capacité à être à la hauteur. Et je crois que les Européens convaincus doivent en être satisfaits. Mais on ne doit pas relâcher cette ambition. Le pire, ce serait d'essayer de revenir sur le modèle d'avant, comme s'il ne s'était rien passé. Et on doit au contraire s'inscrire dans cette transition juste, qui est un vrai projet européen, si on s'en donne les moyens. Ce ne sera pas toujours facile. Il y aura des compromis à opérer, des choix à faire, des débats à mener, y compris avec les travailleurs de certains secteurs, mais il est de notre responsabilité de le faire. Je crois qu'il en va finalement de la capacité à renouveler le projet européen autour de cet enjeu qui concilie l'économie, le social, l'écologie et évidemment la démocratie. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Laurent, for this very inspiring speech. I think the three main points at the end, that the social dialogue indicator and value give really the direction for the future. And I would like to have a question. You don't have to answer now, but to prepare for after the presentation of the other speaker. You spoke about your alliance with the different organizations of civil society, and it was also the same from the CGT, did also alliance with different group. How do you think that in the future the trade union movement on the question of green transition, but more broader of the transformation of the civil society, should have alliance with other actors? And what kind of alliance? We know very well what is social dialogue, but we would be interested to see what is your opinion. But that's for later. First, the full presentation. And the next speaker is Philippe Lambert, who is the co-president of the Green and will present his view about the future. We had the chance to organize with him a dialogue on post-growth, and you were in this building more than 1 year ago, and we tried to reorganize that, and Luca was at the final discussion. And I think that's important because there is positive dialogue with the Green, the environmental movement, but sometimes also tension. So let's speak frankly, and you always speak frankly. And I give you the floor. I don't know if you will speak in French or English. If you prefer Spanish, it's okay too. But give you the floor, 10 minutes maximum, as Laurent Berger was able to do. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Merci Philippe. Je vais parler français, d'autant plus que c'est la première fois que j'ai de ma vie l'occasion d'être, en tout cas dans la même salle virtuelle que Laurent Berger, que je voudrais d'abord saluer avec beaucoup d'enthousiasme parce que, bon, je suis le travail de Laurent Berger depuis longtemps à distance. J'ai vu les 66 propositions auxquelles je souscris intégralement. On a envie de dire presque Laurent président. Mais bon, je ne vais pas me mêler du débat de 2022 en France. Mais en tout cas, il y a un vrai enjeu là. Alors, je voudrais dire aussi tout mon plaisir d'entendre le discours de Laurent, parce qu'il est bien ici question d'un changement systémique. Ça fait 12 ans que je suis député européen, je peux dire qu'au moment où je suis devenu député européen, et depuis le début, j'ai essayé d'avoir un lien constant avec la Confédération européenne des syndicats, j'ai eu l'impression qu'on avait vraiment un malentendu entre nous qui plaidions le changement systémique, et l'impression qu'on avait, c'est que le mouvement syndical européen, en fait, était essentiellement d'accord avec le modèle basé sur la croissance. La seule question était celle de la redistribution, où là, il y avait une tension. Mais il n'y avait pas vraiment, nous semble-t-il, à l'époque, de remise en cause d'un modèle qui est construit sur une vision de l'être humain qui est d'abord un producteur et un consommateur, et donc où finalement tout se résume à une économie qui exploite sans limite les ressources de la planète et du vivant, en ce compris les humains, pour maximiser la croissance, en se disant quand le PIB va, tout va. Je suis évidemment, on est maintenant à des années-lumière de cela, et le discours de Laurent l'a montré, et c'est cela qui fait évidemment que les relations entre la galaxie de l'écologie politique et le mouvement syndical ont changé de nature, je pense. Je pense que nous sommes des alliés naturels, et je voudrais juste vous partager ma lecture du contexte. Lorsque Jean-Claude Juncker a quitté la présidence de la Commission, il nous a fait un discours pendant une demi-heure pour faire le point sur ses 5 ans de présidence. Est-ce que vous imaginez que le président sortant de la Commission parvient à parler pendant une demi-heure de ces 5 ans sans mentionner une fois le mot climat, sans mentionner une fois le mot environnement? C'est pendant ces 5 ans que la conférence de Paris, par exemple, a eu lieu. Il n'en parle même pas. Je veux dire, les contraintes biophysiques de la planète, le fait que notre planète est limitée, ça ne lui venait pas à l'esprit. Et se retrouve aujourd'hui à la tête de la Commission Ursula von der Leyen, qui vient de prendre la parole, qui décide de mettre un Green Deal européen, de faire d'un Green Deal européen le pilier central de son quinquennat. Alors on va dire, ouais, ok, tout ça c'est de la poudre aux yeux. Non, c'est pas vrai. On ne peut pas dire que c'est de la poudre aux yeux. Pour nous, le Green Deal européen est évidemment une bonne surprise dans le sens où, il reconnaît le caractère systémique et existentiel de l'enjeu auquel nous faisons face sur le plan planétaire. Je pense que ce Green Deal garde des angles morts importants, et je pense à l'angle mort de la politique agricole commune et encore plus à l'angle mort de la politique commerciale européenne. Je veux dire, si on est sérieux avec le Green Deal, il va falloir revoir ces politiques de fond en comble. Mais en tout cas, au moins, il y a une intention de prendre en compte les contraintes biophysiques de la planète et de faire en sorte que l'Europe, au lieu d'être à la traîne, soit à la pointe de ce changement de système qui ne dit pas son nom. Parce que si vous écoutez Ursula von der Leyen, je n'ai pas pu entendre le début de son intervention, mais elle parle encore du Green Deal européen comme notre nouveau modèle de croissance. Si on veut dire par là, c'est notre stratégie économique principale, je suis d'accord. Si on veut dire par là qu'une croissance verte est possible, là, j'ai des doutes très sérieux. Mais peu importe. L'important, c'est de se retrousser les manches et de se mettre au travail. Le risque qui aurait pu se matérialiser, c'est que l'arrivée de la pandémie aurait mis un terme prématuré au Green Deal. Et ça n'a pas été le cas. Ça n'a pas été le cas, ce qui veut dire que la lame de fond des mobilisations en faveur de la lutte contre le changement climatique et la perte de biodiversité, j'insiste là-dessus, et l'épuisement des ressources, certains mentionnaient dans les questions la question du lithium, on pourra en parler. Cette lame de fond est toujours là. Et je pense que la conscience augmente. Je rappelle quand même qu'Ursula von der Leyen n'est pas une verte, elle est une conservatrice européenne. Et malgré tout, elle met le Green Deal au cœur de sa politique. Donc là, on a, me semble-t-il, une impulsion bienvenue. Je dis, le Green Deal n'est pas parfait, mais en tout cas, il est bienvenu. Et j'ai envie de dire, je ne veux pas choquer, mais que la pandémie est, comment est-ce que je dirais, un événement utile dans le sens où il fait voler en éclats une série de vérités révélées auxquelles trop de décideurs politiques croyaient dur comme fer. Vérités révélées comme le fait que il faut soumettre la vie à l'économie. Non, on soumet l'économie à la vie. Et c'est ce qu'on a fait avec le confinement. Alors, ce n'est pas très amusant, mais ça nous rappelle quand même qu'il y a une hiérarchie entre la vie et l'économie. Le fait que les pouvoirs publics ont un rôle absolument moteur et pas servile par rapport au marché. Le fait que la dette ça ne peut pas être un tabou dans la mesure où on est face à des enjeux vitaux. S'il faut s'endetter pour y faire face, on le fait. Et donc, je vois toute une série de ces dogmes qui ont volé en éclats. Alors, je ne voudrais pas non plus donner l'impression d'être un optimiste béat parce que oui, le fait qu'il y ait un Green Deal européen qui met en fait la pression aux États membres, parce que je peux vous dire, moi je parle de Belgique, la Belgique était une des lanternes rouges européennes en termes d'action verte, on va dire, même si depuis peu de temps les Verts sont au gouvernement, mais donc historiquement la Belgique est une lanterne rouge. Sans la pression européenne, la Belgique serait encore pire. Et donc clairement, on a une impulsion européenne, on a une pandémie qui fait voler en éclats toute une série de verrous, mais pour prendre une métaphore footballistique, ce n'est pas parce que la défense adverse est un peu égaillée et qu'il y a une ouverture devant le but que le ballon il va rentrer tout seul dans les filets. Donc on est maintenant au moment où l'équipe doit sortir son plus grand jeu, son meilleur jeu, pour faire rentrer le ballon de la transition écologique et solidaire dans les filets de la politique menée en Europe, des politiques menées en Europe. Et ça, ce n'est pas encore gagné, parce que les résistances sont là, évidemment. Il ne faut quand même pas s'imaginer que les gagnants de la mondialisation néolibérale vont mettre bas les armes sans combattre. Autrement dit, que ce soit sur le plan des normes environnementales, des normes sociales, la résistance est toujours forte. Et nous jouons dans un contexte, et ça c'est le côté dangereux de la pandémie, le fait que la pandémie aggrave de manière brutale des inégalités, la fracture sociale, pour reprendre l'expression de Jacques Chirac, qui était déjà dans un état préoccupant avant la pandémie les fait littéralement exploser. Autrement dit, je pense que nous patinons sur une glace extrêmement fine. Extrêmement fine. Et si le plan de relance, si la sortie de la pandémie ne se traduit pas par un effort déterminé, résolu de réduire la fracture sociale, ce vers quoi, on pourrait perdre la course de vitesse contre les antidémocrates, contre les partisans d'une insurrection nationale populiste. Ça, pour moi, ça reste un risque majeur. Autrement dit, on ne va pas pouvoir éternellement dire aux plus fragilisés de nos sociétés, les gars, attendez encore un peu et on va lancer la transition verte et on va faire en sorte qu'elle soit un peu juste. Ce n'est pas possible. Si on fait ça, on va à l'explosion. Et donc, ça, c'est l'enjeu qu'on a aujourd'hui politiquement. C'est celui d'engager radicalement, et quand je dis radicalement, ça veut dire en allant à la racine de ce système d'exploitation qu'est le capitalisme mondialisé. Est-ce qu'on peut engager un changement radical qui soit assez rapidement inclusif, qui montre que, on réduit les inégalités plutôt que les augmenter. Et ça, j'ai envie de dire, ça reste une préoccupation parce que là aussi, cette musique à mes oreilles quand Laurent mentionne le volet fiscal. Je me rappelle d'un débat, c'était peut-être il y a 7-8 ans, à la Maison européenne des syndicats, où je disais, le combat sur les conditions de travail, etc., est crucial, mais on ne gagnera pas le combat des services publics, le combat de la lutte contre l'inégalité sans faire du combat fiscal un combat central. Et ça avait rencontré un enthousiasme, on va dire, mitigé du côté de la CES. Aujourd'hui, je pense que tout le monde réalise que c'est un enjeu majeur. Et là, il n'y a pas à sortir de là. Si on veut à la fois financer les services publics, financer la partie publique de la transition et réduire les inégalités, il va falloir que celles et ceux qui jusqu'ici ont été les grands bénéficiaires des réformes fiscales néolibérales de ces 40 dernières années se mettent à contribuer. Et ça suppose une approche européenne. Et là, on n'y est pas. On n'y est pas encore. Je ne dis pas qu'il n'y a pas de prise de conscience au niveau des institutions européennes, mais en tout cas, on n'est pas encore dans l'action. Et là, le problème, c'est qu'on a la barrière de l'unanimité, évidemment, et le fait que les égoïsmes fiscaux nationaux continuent à jouer. Mais si on veut que ceux qui devraient être les gros contribuables contribuent à la hauteur de leur capacité, par là, je veux dire les personnes physiques, c'est-à-dire les détenteurs de capitaux, qui sont les très, très grands gagnants, non seulement des réformes fiscales ces 30 dernières années, mais aussi de la pandémie, et par ailleurs les plus grandes entreprises, si ces deux groupes ne se mettent pas à contribuer massivement plus que ce qui contribue jusqu'aujourd'hui, le rêve d'une transition écologique et solidaire s'évaporera. Et là, je ne donne pas grand-chose de l'avenir de notre démocratie. Et donc, c'est à la fois, si vous voulez, dans un état d'esprit enthousiaste, mais empreint de gravité, que le groupe que je co-préside avec Ska Keller a abordé cette législature. Et donc, nous voulons sortir notre meilleur jeu, à la fois au niveau européen et dans les États membres, en association étroite avec les forces vives de la société. Et je continue de mettre les syndicats au premier rang de ces forces vives pour mener le combat de la transition écologique et solidaire. Je pense que nous avons absolument partie liée et que la bataille, comme je dis, la balle n'est pas au fond des filets, mais on peut la mettre au fond des filets. Et donc, allons-y. Je crois que j'ai tenu mes 10 minutes.
Effectivement, Philippe, tu as tenu tes 10 minutes et merci pour ces métaphores footballistiques. On verra si on mettra la balle au fond du filet. Je pense à un point essentiel qui avait déjà été abordé est celui évidemment de la taxation, de la richesse et des inégalités. Mais j'aurais envie de te poser une question encore pour la fin. C'est très beau, mais qu'est-ce que tu dirais que pour convaincre quelqu'un qui travaille dans l'industrie automobile, qui avec les différents changements risque de perdre son travail éventuellement rapidement si on va plus vite vers des systèmes électriques et qu'on change notre mobilité, quel pourrait être le message des Verts, quel pourrait être, comment est-ce qu'on le mettrait dans notre team commun qui devrait marquer des buts? On laisse les autres orateurs, c'est la question pour toi. And then we move to the next speaker, and it's Anne Breunings, who is the Executive Director of the European Environment Agency, which is in Denmark. And it's a very important agency because they provide a lot of report, data, and also paper for discussion. And I give you the floor. You are now, I think, in Antwerp. If I see what is look like the city you are, for 10 minutes too. And I think that you have a PowerPoint, so you will upload your PowerPoint. Thank you to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you for the invitation. It's an absolute pleasure to spend the afternoon with you for this important debate. And in fact, it takes me 20 years back when I, for the first time, published something on workers' organizations and sustainable development, after which I then later became the director of the HIVA, Higher Institute for Labor Studies at the University of Leuven. So I have a strong background and past in the role of workers' organizations, labor unions, and the socio-economic dimension of sustainability questions. But today I will speak, of course, from the perspective of the European Environment Agency, and I assume that you will see my slides. I think that is the case. What I would like to do is to start from the sober point where we know that we are facing unprecedented challenges, and this is based on a strong global scientific consensus. A consensus on global warming, which is formed in the IPCC, a consensus around biodiversity, where we also finally recognize the importance on equal footing with climate. And thirdly, lesser known, is the International Resource Panel, which talks about the fundamentally unsustainable use of resources on this planet. And if we look at the scientific consensus, the message that is coming is rather clear. We need urgent action. We are in a pivotal decade, and one of the reasons is that we are already facing irreversibilities, and our economies and societies are already paying a price of our negligence in dealing with environment and climate issues. On top of that, we are past some tipping points, which means that we will be dealing with this at least this complete century and beyond. And all of these issues are interconnected, and they are connected indeed to systems of production and consumption. Now, Europe's answer to this is rather clear. It's the European Green Deal, which you could say is a paradigm shift in politics and policy with very high ambitions: climate neutrality, a strong biodiversity agenda, dealing differently with resources in the economy, zero pollution, a health link with our food system, farm to fork. But then I think rather significant, in that same Green Deal, we find the term just transition. We find a link to investments and the role of capital and finance, and the link with the new industrial strategy. So I would say that every European program until now is in essence about two things. It's about growth and jobs, or if it's very innovative, about jobs and growth. But what this plan does, what the Commission has done, is to say, yes, of course, it is about the economy and society, but we need to understand that in the 21st century, there are fundamentally different boundary conditions to delivering a healthy economy and a society that delivers well-being for citizens. Yeah, so it is the most pressing challenge, so the Commission says, an opportunity, and we must lead in a transitional perspective. I could also make the clear link to the systems of production and consumption. This is a number of graphs that represent what they call the Great Acceleration, 5 decades of incredibly rapid economic growth, consumption and production on this planet. And this is the effect on our planetary systems. It follows the same lines, yeah? Because we have never really addressed these impacts in a serious way. But now we have a policy setting that promises to reverse or at least halt these negative impacts. Now, after 5 decades of increasing the impacts on the environment and now promising to turn that around, there are obvious questions. How serious are we about bending the trend? I think the Commission President made it clear that they were very serious. But then how credible is this? How feasible is this? And what type of policies and knowledge do we need to get there? And that is the core business of the European Environment Agency. I think it's obvious, and Philippe Lambert's also emphasized that we need to think in terms of systemic change. And it's systems like the food system, the energy system, the mobility system, and the built environment that actually deliver human health and well-being, but also social cohesion. And these systems consist of technology, companies, research, knowledge, but also fiscal systems, distributional effects, and all of them need to be addressed if we are going to see systemic change. That means that we need to recognize the fundamental drivers and address those, come with transformative policy frameworks, cover some policy gaps, and I will not dwell on those, but also recognize that this is a society-wide project which will not be led only from governments or, as some believe, from the business community. It will have to involve all the forces and creativity in society, including those in social organizations and labor unions more particularly. We also need to recognize that this systemic change is disruptive, and the green curve is the optimistic curve that we like to talk about mostly, where we experiment with new technologies, new business models, new solutions, new types of work. We accelerate that innovation, then we institutionalize it, and we come at a higher level that we call stabilization, which is more sustainable than before. We see that in the energy system, in the mobility system. That is the positive line. But of course, there is also the line that we don't like to talk about so much. And that is the line where we need to step away, phase out those technologies, solutions, and economic activities that actually we need to phase out if we want to go to a low carbon circular economy that is just and that respects the boundaries of this planet. So we need to step away from the optimization paradigm, and that means destabilization, breakdown of certain economic activities and phasing them out. And that is, of course, where the conflicts can be, where people can lose their job, where companies can go belly up if they don't manage to adapt, which is why we think that that's where we should focus our attention and create the enabling conditions. So it's not only about speeding up and scaling up the green arrow, it's about speeding up and scaling up, moving out of what is unsustainable, because that creates the space for sustainability. And it's also about addressing the externalities. And we have long not addressed environment and climate externalities. It cannot be the goal now to not address the social and societal externalities. So we need to take those into account in any model regarding the future. When we look at investments, we think that there is a high risk that we might be investing in dead-end streets, and that is what we call marginal efficiency gain investments. We keep investing, tweaking a bit, making a bit more efficient the models, the technologies, the solutions that we have today. And that will never lead us to low carbon economy or circularity. So these are, by definition, lock-in investments. They lead to stranded assets. That is the talk of the day. But I think it's fair to say that they might also lead to stranded workers and stranded regions. And that is, of course, a risk that we cannot accept as a society. So it is all about investments in the future, the jobs of the future, and the society of the future. We also in the agency work on social vulnerability and just transitions. We have done several reports where, for example, we map income against air quality in Europe. And it's clear that we still have complete regions in Europe where energy systems, domestic heating, energy poverty, and in general, low income play a big role when it comes to linking these two. We've done much more work on that, but I don't have time to now dwell on that. We, by the way, work together also with the European Foundation for the Improvement of Living and Working Conditions in Dublin to strengthen the work on these issues. Altogether, we think that it is about recognizing a different order. And this is the SDG color scheme as we know it. And I think it's clear that we need to think of the natural capital as foundational for any society in the long term. And on that, we can build healthy societies. And that includes issues of distribution, equality, opportunity. And for that, we need an enabling economy. Unfortunately, we still live in a model that is often dominated by this, where the economy is the center of gravity, where we allow that economy to draw on societal resources. Think of debates in education, where we do not educate critical citizens, but we educate people who can enter the workforce. Rather than anything else. And that can draw endlessly and without cost almost on the biosphere. So turning that model around is absolutely essential. I think it's clear that the window to turn the crises in environment and climate around is closing. We are truly in a pivotal decade, and that means that bold action is needed. So we should focus on the implementation of that agenda, do things better. But we should also take sustainability as the core guiding principle. That means doing things differently. And I think talking about sustainable finance, capital in the system is there absolutely critical. Americans speak unapologetically about capitalism. In Europe, we're a bit more soft-spoken. We talk about the market economy. But how can you expect radically different outcomes in a system called capitalism without addressing the role of capital? And I think that is what Europe is partially doing through its sustainable finance initiative, which is a first, by the way, anywhere at that scale. It also means that we need to do the right investments, transformative investments, not only in technology, but also in how we deal with the world of work and how that needs to be transformed into the right direction for the 21st century. And that means fostering innovation throughout society, not only in businesses, not only in technology. We are looking at societal innovation, and it is obvious that labor unions and workers' organizations, together with other social organizations, play a critical role in that transition. I would like to stop here, and of course, happy to respond to any questions or remarks from the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans, for this very good and showing really in your presentation what are the conflicts and what are at stake. And as I said from the beginning, it will not be a smooth path. We will try to do it the smoothest possible, but there will be conflict, and they will have to have choice in the future, because it's a systematic change, as you said. I have a question for you, because you have a new series in the agency, which is a fantastic title. I'm rather jealous not to have that for the ETUI, Narratives for Change. And the first publication was about the discussion about grow and post-grow, and if you look to the Twitter exchange, some were surprised that EU agency were leading the debate, the debate for post-growth. So I would like to see how you see your agency and what is the importance of that debate that you were launching very recently on your website with a very good paper, and I advise everyone to read it. Now we are moving to the last speaker, but not the least, Maria-Jean Rodriguez, president of the FEPS, and she will present her view on the challenge. And as I know her for more than 20 years, I think that she will, as the other speaker, be very frank on what is at stake in that big transition. Thank you for joining us.
All of you, because in fact we have been together in several episodes of building the social dimension of the European project. And here we are again in a new one. And I would like, first of all, to say that I do think that we need a new social contract, which should be a social ecological contract. And I think this is particularly brave and enlightened and courageous from trade unions to commit to this and to launch this discussion. I believe this is the moment where in European history we'll remember trade unions taking such a brave position. I'm coming with a message of truth and of strong European solidarity. And that's why I need to start by saying that while we need to recognize that we need to have deep transformation to avert a climate disaster, we also need to take into account that this big transformation will change our lives and will also destroy jobs in very important sectors. This is the truth, and we know this. And this means for me the following, is that we cannot say that the current commitment with the European Green Deal, which is, I think, is a great commitment, cannot be seen as the next European growth strategy unless this is strongly combined with a big plan for investments of the future, jobs of the future, and improving our living conditions. Otherwise, this is not equivalent to the strategies we had in the past, starting in 2000. And this means that this is the moment now in all member states to prepare recovery plans where this promise is delivered. Yes, we do need a transition to a greener society and economy, but we need to turn this into much more better jobs, reskilling, and improving living conditions. So social partners, trade unions' role now is crucial. We need to prepare good recovery plans, making the best of the historical decisions taken on financial means. And particularly a stronger European budget, the recovery budget, the common issuance of bonds. Yes, these are historical steps. My second point is that in the meantime, we go on confronted with global pressures, with the fact that the single market creates all the time inequalities, regional inequalities, social inequalities. And that's why we need to come up with a stronger, framework to develop the social dimension of the European project. Well, this was the intention of the European Pillar of Social Rights. This was exactly my purpose when I worked for this as the rapporteur in the European Parliament and the interinstitutional negotiator. But of course, now we need to turn this into an action plan. And to give this a content is crucial, but let's have in mind that with the European social pillar, we are moving to a new foundation of social dimension. Is the fact that from now on, the social dimension is based not only on workers' rights, but on European citizenship. And this is a major historical step forward. All European citizens should be entitled to the same fundamental social rights. So let's deliver on this promise and translate this into a good action plan, and also in many other decisions being taken right now. I give you an example, important trade agreements being negotiated now. We need to make sure that our values of social Europe are taken on board of this negotiation. But I must focus my intervention on the current situation created by the COVID devastation. And right now we are in a race against time, rolling out the vaccine plans, coping with the new variants of the virus, at the same time saving lives and saving jobs and saving viable companies. And there is a dilemma. Yes, there is a trade-off. We could cope with this trade-off by launching exceptional instruments, notably the SURE instrument, saving many viable jobs and companies. But the dilemma is still there. And this means that we really need to go to exceptional action. From my viewpoint, in this right moment, the top priority is, of course, saving lives, but going on with a big bazooka, stronger European budget and stronger European recovery fund, plus stronger national budgets to save jobs and to protect the so-called essential workers. They need to have this particular strong protection. But there is a second priority from my viewpoint, which is about the digital transformation. Because this COVID crisis has also accelerated in exponential terms the digital transformation of our activity. And right now we have a lot of workers moving to telework, combining with those who are already in platform work, combining with those whose jobs were replaced by robots in manufacturing sectors. And I need to stress that we are just at the beginning, because a larger transformation will start once artificial intelligence will change almost all our economic sectors. I believe this is the moment for us to shape the way we are conducting the digital transformation. We need to push for a European way, which is different, clearly different, from both the American way and the Chinese way. The European way must make sure that we use the digital transformation to come up with better access to education, to health, to better products and services. And secondly, making sure that whoever works in the digital environment, whatever the kind of job, whatever the kind of company or sector, they must count on the same fundamental social rights and access to social protection. We need to shape these now, because otherwise it will be too late. And this brings me to the conclusion I'd like to stress. Taking now the long-term perspective, I believe that what we need to prepare is not just recovery, is in fact a big reconstruction of our economies and societies. I think probably the best parallel we can have in historical terms is the periods immediately after World War II. A devastating shock, destroying many lives, many jobs, many living conditions, must be overtaken by an ambitious plan to rebuild, to reconstruct our economies and societies in a sounder basis, starting with a healthy life, healthy for us, humankind, also healthy for the planet, a new concept of well-being, translated into new kind of jobs, more healthy working conditions, and I would say rebuilding a welfare system for the 21st century, making sure that all citizens they have the same rights to social protection, to access to public services. But let me conclude by saying I don't believe this is possible unless we make a major overhaul of the taxation system. The taxation system is deeply outdated. We have new sources of wealth creation, which are just not being taxed. Those who pollute, those who make extra profits in the financial markets, those who count with the digital transformation to make also extra profits, they are not paying the due taxes they should pay. So I think that these should be the terms of a new social ecological contract. Yes, we need it, but we need to call for him with very precise terms. So you have my views about this, and many thanks again.
Merci, merci Maranjo. Thank you. I will not ask you the easy question from Lisbon to Porto, but I would like to ask you a question about the numeric, the digital transformation, because you mentioned, and it was also alluded by the president of the Commission, but do you think that it is something that can be managed smoothly with the green transition? Because there is a lot of question that we go for the 5G, but which 5G will use or will emit more CO2. And the two projects are not exactly the same. With the digital change, we go faster and faster. If you look what we try to do with the green transition is perhaps to go a little bit less fast, to rethink working time, to be slower, slow foot, slow city, etc. So how do you think the complementarity, but also the tension between the two is a big question. But now we turn you receive, vous avez reçu chacun une question, donc on peut commencer le débat avec Laurent sur la question des alliances. Et puis passer à l'équipe de foot avec Philippe pour voir comment on pouvait rajouter les travailleurs dans l'industrie automobile. Mais je pense que tous vous avez fait référence aux questions de certains emplois où certains secteurs allaient souffrir ou avoir des grandes difficultés ou pourraient avoir des grandes difficultés dans la transition pour passer à la croissance, à la post-croissance et finalement aux deux grandes transformations. Si vous pouvez répondre extrêmement rapidement à ces grandes questions, plutôt vers 2 minutes, il nous reste une quinzaine de minutes pour le débat et puis le team waiver. Laurent, quand vous connaissez tous le français, je peux faire la fin de mon intervention en français.
Oui, merci. Les enjeux dont on parle sont des enjeux d'une complexité énorme. Il touche des emplois, il touche des façons de vivre, comme ça a été dit par Hans, il touche des territoires et donc des équilibres construits de longue date, contestables ou pas, peu importe, mais on n'est plus dans une relation qui a été toujours un peu plus que ça, mais qui a été un peu traditionnelle entre en tout cas dans le monde social, dans le monde syndical, entre l'employeur, les salariés et la confrontation entre les intérêts du capital et les intérêts du travail et une place du travail qu'il fallait, un des droits des travailleurs qu'il fallait faire émerger. On est aujourd'hui dans des compromis à construire qui touchent des parties prenantes bien au-delà de ce monde du travail. Et nous, si on a fait cette alliance au niveau national, 62 organisations, c'est qu'on était d'accord sur le chapeau. Vous voyez, on est tous d'accord sur la transition juste. On est tous d'accord sur la répartition, je sais pas, sur un certain nombre d'éléments, sur le fait qu'il faut se préoccuper des personnes les plus en situation difficile, les plus exclues, etc. Mais quand on rentre dans le fond des choses sur la question de la transition, c'est pas inintéressant qu'une organisation syndicale assume la nécessité de baisser les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. C'est pas inintéressant qu'une organisation écologique s'intéresse à la façon dont les travailleurs seront impactés et comment il faut faire articuler ça. Et si on ne noue pas des alliances au-delà de partenariats ponctuels ou de grandes déclarations collectives pour plonger dans la réalité concrète et la complexité de s'inscrire dans cette transition écologique, on n'y arrivera pas. Et c'est ça, en fait, qu'on essaye de faire. On creuse, par exemple, et la table ronde durant ce séminaire sur la question de l'automobile était une vraie belle question. Et on n'y répond pas par des slogans, on y répond par la volonté et la capacité à construire dans la complexité de la réalisation de cette transition. Et donc, moi, je crois que le mouvement syndical gagne et gagnera encore plus à l'avenir à garder sa spécificité de la représentation des travailleurs et de l'attachement à ce qu'ils aient des droits collectifs, qu'ils soient défendus individuellement et collectivement, mais gagnera aussi à être un des porte-voix d'une société civile qui intègre un modèle de développement vers lequel on souhaite aller, qui doit tenir compte de plus de complexité que précédemment. Et pour ça, les alliances sont, de mon point de vue, indispensables. Les alliances de fond, pas des alliances de circonstances ou d'affichage, des travails de fond pour regarder ce que ça demande comme chemin, par quel chemin on peut s'inscrire dans cette transition écologique et cette transition juste. Parce que, évidemment, il n'y aura pas d'évolution sur le terrain écologique, de lutte contre le réchauffement climatique, s'il n'y a pas un chemin sur la justice sociale et la réduction des inégalités. Et donc, on a besoin de travailler les uns avec les autres, de se confronter, et autant qu'on le fasse dans des alliances que par voie de presse interposée, on n'arrivera pas à progresser.
Merci, Laurent. C'était, je pense, extrêmement clair, extrêmement stratégique et donne une vision pour le futur. Philippe?
Alors, c'est sûr que si on fait des voitures électriques, elles demandent moins d'heures de travail par voiture que des voitures à moteur thermique. Maintenant, une réponse facile serait de dire faisons plus de voitures. Oui, sauf que ce n'est pas vraiment ça qu'il faut faire pour la transition écologique. Je pourrais ajouter que dans un monde d'après-transition, est-ce qu'il faut encore autant de publicité? Est-ce que l'industrie de la pub ne devrait pas tout simplement disparaître? Autrement dit, est-ce que ces jobs-là ne devraient pas disparaître? Et ma première réponse aux travailleurs, c'est de dire oui, mais est-ce que je dois en déduire qu'en fait, il faut continuer à faire tourner une machine qui est en train de tuer la possibilité pour l'être humain de vivre sur cette planète, juste pour que les gens aient un emploi? Et je pense que la personne sera d'accord de dire non, ça on ne peut quand même pas faire. Mais alors, comment on s'y prend? J'ai envie de dire que si on regarde le monde tel qu'il est aujourd'hui, si je regarde les heures de travail qui sont aujourd'hui ouvrables par les travailleurs européens, je constate qu'on utilise à peu près les 2/3 maximum. Que déjà aujourd'hui, 1/3 des heures potentielles de travail n'est pas utilisé. Pourquoi est-ce qu'on continue à faire croire aux gens qu'on a besoin de 40 heures ou 38 heures ou 35 heures de travail par semaine de chaque personne en âge de travailler pour produire tous les biens et services dont on a besoin? Peut-être qu'on a besoin de moins. Oui, mais alors quoi? Il faut réduire la durée du temps de travail et partager le travail différemment. Oui, mais quid de moi qui suis caissière et qui déjà travaille avec des horaires à la mort moelle-neu et je ne gagne pas assez que pour vivre décemment. Ah oui, mais donc il ne faut pas seulement partager le travail, il va falloir partager les revenus différemment. Ah oui, oui. Donc la question de l'organisation du marché du travail, c'est aussi la question de la sécu et la question fiscale. Et en fait, on va devoir, comme le disait Laurent, concevoir des solutions de transition. Parce qu'on ne parle pas de renverser la table, on parle bien d'inventer des solutions. Mais il faut partir du point de vue que continuer, enfin laisser le système aller sur sa course, c'est la garantie de l'élimination de l'humanité sur cette planète. Et que donc ça, il faut en sortir. Mais oui, ça veut dire que demain, il y a certains jobs qui vont disparaître ou certains jobs qui seront nécessaires en moindre quantité. Mais j'ai envie de dire en particulier aux gars qui travaillent dans l'automobile, franchement, quand je regarde l'histoire, les gens qui ont les compétences qui leur permettent aujourd'hui de travailler dans l'automobile, ce sont des compétences qui, même dans un monde de la transition, vont rester rares et en demande. Je dis, est-ce que la mobilité va disparaître demain? Ah ben non, pas du tout. Est-ce que la production d'énergie va disparaître demain? Ben non. Est-ce que l'usage du métal va disparaître demain? Ben non. Et est-ce qu'on a intérêt d'ailleurs à réindustrialiser, pardon, à relocaliser une partie de l'industrie en Europe? Ben oui. Et donc, c'est comment est-ce qu'on articule toutes ces contraintes, mais aussi ces objectifs, parce que ce n'est pas que des contraintes, pour inventer des solutions. Et là, personnellement, je pense que plus que jamais, l'heure est à l'intelligence collective. Donc l'idée, et je sais que c'est très présent en France avec un président qui est un monarque élu qui sait tout mieux que tout le monde, mais en réalité, personne, pas même les Verts, n'ont sur plan la société idéale et le GPS pour y arriver. En fait, le défi qu'on a à relever, c'est-à-dire faire en sorte que tous les humains puissent mener une vie digne en respectant les limites physiques de la planète, en fait, c'est une équation qui requiert vraiment la mobilisation de l'intelligence collective. Je n'ai pas toutes les réponses, personne n'a toutes les réponses, mais je crois que collectivement, nous les avons. Et donc, je crois très fort, en effet, non pas à des alliances ponctuelles, mais à une coalition de fond et durable pour mobiliser l'intelligence collective. Et j'ai envie de dire, et je termine par là, que ça suppose aussi une démocratie, y compris une démocratie économique très différente de celle qu'on connaît aujourd'hui. Autrement dit, aujourd'hui encore, même là où je suis, on est dans un monde où les élites politiques se battent entre elles pour savoir qui a la meilleure solution. Je pense que l'humilité doit nous obliger de reconnaître que nos institutions démocratiques doivent être plus que jamais des accoucheuses d'intelligence collective plutôt qu'un match entre, et je reprends la métaphore sportive, un match entre des équipes adverses pour savoir qui sera calife à la place du calife.
Merci Philippe. Hans?
Yes, thank you. In the interest of time, I will try to be short when I say what is the role of the agency in this type of debates. Well, I think it's abundantly evident that economic, environmental and climate problems emerge from a particular socio and economic context, and that their solutions will have to be found in a societal context. So what we have been doing more and more with the agency is placing our environment and climate knowledge squarely in the middle of that social and economic context and making those connections. And we see them particularly at the level of the systems that provide to society, the food system, the mobility system, and the ones that we've been talking about. And so we want to focus on those dimensions as well. That means that we are collaborating with other partners. We are indeed reflecting deeply on what type of society can be operational within the planetary boundaries that are there and that we are surpassing already in a number of places, which means that, yes, we ask questions about fundamental systemic transitions. We ask questions about what is the meaning of growth in such a context. We just published indeed on post-growth and you know the limits to growth, alternatives to growth. Yes, I say that if you look at the current inequality within and between countries and places on the planet, we are kidding ourselves if we think that the current inequality is a fertile ground for long-term sustainability. It is not. That's obvious. Yeah. So we should pay more attention to the Gini coefficient, maybe than to the holy cow of some other economic indicators, we can do natural capital accounting. The methodology is there. We've done it with Eurostat and the Joint Research Center, but there is no mandate to do it. Nobody is tasked to do it. There is no national legislation or European legislation to do natural capital accounting. So if we would focus on this balanced societal economic model within these boundary planets, we have better knowledge and better needles on the compass if we make the choices that can be made. And that includes thinking about fiscal systems and about all the things that have been mentioned. So a modern environment agency is one that understands that it's not by measuring ppms and micrograms that you are at the center of the debate. It is by understanding where these ppms and micrograms come from and how we can address them that you're at the center of the debate. And that has been exactly our ambition and is our ambition for the next 10 years.
Thank you, and that's a very important and a very important ambition to give or to enter in the global debate. So, Maria-Jean, could you close this session because we are really running out of time?
That's the issue you propose, the implications of the digital transition. My point is that this is being extremely accelerated by the COVID crisis, so we really need to pay attention to this. But then we have the question, what is the connection between this transition and the green transition? Look, I believe we can develop a lot of positive synergies. When moving to a circular economy in manufacturing, we do need to develop new digital tools. When we move to a new transportation system or a new way to manage our cities, we do need new digital technologies. So I think we can have a good collaboration between these two transitions. But we need to shape this with our European values. But then we have the second issue, which came across in our panel, is implications for jobs, because the big question comes, are we sacrificing jobs? And of course, there is a lot of concern about this. And my argument about this is that we should push also for the jobs creation, new and quality jobs creation. And this is possible. Because this transformation, provided this is supported by reskilling of all generations, can bring about new jobs. And I think we cannot give up of this. That's why, let me be precise, and I know that we don't have proper time to discuss this. I prefer to use the expression going beyond GDP. Not necessarily going beyond growth, because we need growth, we need to have jobs, because we need to finance our welfare systems, but for sure we need to have a new kind of growth. So what is really wrong is the GDP indicator, because it's measuring wrong things and is not aligning with our priorities. But then my final point is, can we really provide jobs for everyone? And I do think the moment has come to discuss again about sharing jobs, sharing employment, provided that decent wages and living conditions are really there. And now I think that we are moving to historical conditions where this is possible. Perhaps 2 decades ago, it was very difficult, but now this is possible in economic and financial terms, provided we change redistribution and the taxation system. So this is part of the package we need to put forward. But I know that we should have more time to discuss about this. Also with my panel colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. It's, I think that's very fruitful dialogue. But Before giving the floor to Jackie, and I have 30 seconds to, in conclusion, Luca want to answer some of the question or have some reaction. So Luca, I give you the floor. If you can keep it in 2-3 minutes, so we don't have too much. We have still the 30 minutes for waiting the next panel. Luca?
Thank you, Philippe. Of course, it's difficult to, sorry, but we have to, and I still also, okay, perfect, sorry. Social distancing and masks sometimes create troubles. It's impossible to reply to all the questions that have been posted also in the chat in few minutes, but I wanted to react to the very bold and explicit provocation from Philippe Lambert. We are very frank with each other, and we had also very fruitful discussions in the last few years about the topics that have been at the core of this panel. And Philippe is right. Until some years ago, there was an incredible gap, an incredible distance between the analysis of the green and environmental movements and the analysis and solutions supported by the trade unions. And the reason was very clear. The trade unions wanted that jobs and wages came first, and this was done without considering all the other elements that should be part of the picture, including the environment, but also other elements that are really important to achieve a general sustainability and a general well-being in the society, while at the same time, I have also to be provocative, if you want, to some extent, the environmental movements were, rightly so, from their point of view, privileging the environment and the protection of the environment, sometimes not considering the need for having jobs and wages at the same time. So I would say that some years ago, the environmental and the social dimension were fighting against each other, instead of going together to try to build a better society for all. And this is exactly the challenge that we have now. And I think that we are, to some extent, better equipped than in the past to keep, on the contrary, these two dimensions together. So how we can make sure that we can protect the environment, we can repair the horrible damage that a growth-led economy has created to the environment and to the society on the one side, but also preserve jobs, well-being of the people, their capacity of earning a decent wage, of making a living, of being protected by social protection, and so on and so forth. To be very blunt and frank, I'm not particularly passionate about this discussion if we should insist on growth or not. I'm more passionate about the discussion on how we can build a more sustainable and inclusive economy, a more sustainable and inclusive society that is respectful of the three elements that Hans put in his slides. So the environment, the biosphere, the society, and the economy at the same time. In this respect, we will never be able, as trade unions, to defend a solution that doesn't imply the fact that everybody should have a decent job, that everybody should make a living from this job, and that everybody can be protected properly. So we are strong defenders of the environment and sustainability, but we want that this goes together with having a decent job, making a decent living, and being protected. This is the real point, how we can match all these elements together in a way that it can be a win-win situation instead of a lose-lose situation that unfortunately has been for too long now. Then there are many other questions that have been raised that will deserve, as Maria Joao said, a much longer discussion, but for sure all this analysis and reflection about well-being, even happiness indexes, the fact that we need to reform our taxation system, our fiscal rules, and that, let me conclude on this, that is the first question I've seen in the chat. The question was, should setting social minimum standards, I suppose it means, is this going to undermine the situation that exists in more advanced countries where social protection and social systems are better than in others. Well, the question is posed in the wrong way, because what we want is not to set a social minimum. What we want is to have upward convergence. Upward convergence means that everybody should get better, and not going to the minimum common denominator that would in the end harm everybody. We need to have upward convergence on environmental conditions, on social conditions, on a more sustainable economy. If we win this challenge, I think we will have done a very great job together.
Thank you, Luca, and I fully agree that in this session we didn't have enough time, but we have 3 days to address the question, and all the questions that are in the chat. There is also the global dimension. There is different. We have panels, and we will transfer them to the chair of the panel, so they will be taken into account. No, we can not answer to all. I would like to give now the floor to Jackie Davis, which is our team waiver. And what is the team waiver? We had her in the last 3 conferences, is to try to make some red thread between the different sessions. And she will here just explain her role, and then we will close the panel officially. So, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Philippe. And yes, indeed, I'm Jackie Davis, and I will be your theme weaver. It's a role I've played in physical versions of this event in the past, and I'm delighted to be with you again. So what is a theme weaver? I hear you ask. What it means is that I'm going to follow the discussions over all 3 days of this conference and try to build a picture for you as we go along of the key points that are emerging from the discussions and the answers that the different sessions are coming up with, looking at this issue from a wide range of perspectives, and try to answer some of the key questions linked to the title of this conference, towards a new socio-ecological contract, and to what our opening speakers have been saying. Let me just mention very briefly just a few of them. Why do we need a new socio-ecological contract? As we've already heard, the EU's highly ambitious climate change targets and the wider transition needed in our economy means all aspects of our economy and society will have to change dramatically. So how do we incorporate this new logic of sustainability into a new contract, and then turn that contract into concrete action on the ground? What key challenges does this new contract need to address? What should the key ingredients be? Is this, as Philippe Boucher described at the beginning, a genuine turning point? If it is, can we seize the opportunity to redefine our goals as a society and, to use Luca Vicentini's words, build a new paradigm for our economic model? For as many speakers have already said, we cannot return post-COVID to business as usual or an old normal. And indeed, Ursula von der Leyen said in her intervention, and I quote, "We need to build a people's recovery. Our rules are based on old realities. We now need a new social rule book to reconcile the economic with the social and with the planet." But what exactly do we mean when we talk about a just transition? And having defined the goals, what targets, what goals, precise objectives do we need to set? And how are we going to measure it all? We've had that discussion already about indicators. What indicators are we going to need going beyond GDP? And hopefully we will identify real priorities for actions, those concrete steps to move from words to actions. And finally, who needs to do what? How do we build the massive societal coalitions that will be needed for a shared vision to emerge and for that just transition that commands public support? And within that, what role can and should all the different actors who need to play a part involved, what should they do? The markets, the state, industry, civil society, and most crucially, of course, in the context of this conference, the trade union movement. Because Ursula von der Leyen underlined in the importance of social dialogue in her opening speech, I'm quoting, "Good policies that will stand the test of time can only be built through dialogue." So what more needs to be done to ensure trade unions play a key role in shaping answers to those challenges and developing a roadmap for a sustainable future? How do you build on the recent progress, maintain momentum that's been generated by the current focus on social issues in the COVID crisis? To find answers to these questions and try to make those connections, very mindful of what speakers were saying about can't work in silos, need a systematic and a systemic approach. I'll be listening to all the plenaries. I've asked the rapporteurs from the breakout panels to report back on the highlights of their discussions, and I'll be trying to follow them as well. Just finally to say, inevitably, with such a packed program, I'll only be able to give you a flavor, a snapshot of everything that's being discussed. But I look forward very much to seeing you. I'll be back couple of times tomorrow and again on Friday. So with that, may I wish you very fruitful discussions, and I'll see you in the virtual sense later on. Thanks very much, Philippe. Back to you.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you also for the interpreter in French and English, because you are going so quick that I think it's a real challenge to translate you. With that, I think we had really what we want for the opening session. The key question, a dialogue that has to be engaged, a dialogue and social dialogue in different dimensions of this dialogue, but also the recognizing that we are in a systemic change. Thank you for all the panelists. Thank you, Luca. Luca will continue in the next session that we have the chance to have Mariana Mazzucato, who has published a new book last week that will have a discussion with key and high-level trade unionists. I would like also to take the opportunity to thank all the team of the TUI, and in particular the ComPub team and Sophie and Maria, because there is a lot of hard work to make it possible. So thank you all for all your activities, support, proposal to make that happening. So now it's time for a break, and we return in 20 minutes for the next session. Thank you all, and thank you, Luca, for this first session.